I used to believe my life was ordinary, predictable, almost invisible in its simplicity. To most people, I was just another man driving an aging truck to a city job. A man who lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood with trimmed hedges and maples that flamed orange in the fall. My name is Elias Thorne. I am 40 years old, and until recently, I thought my unremarkable routine was enough to keep my world steady. But life has a way of testing the strength of the walls you build, and mine were about to collapse in ways I could never have imagined. My mornings always began the same way. I would wake before the sun, shuffle into the kitchen, and listen to the soft hum of the coffee maker, as it filled the room with the scent of roasted beans. The ritual was comforting, almost sacred. I would stand by the counter, buttering plain toast, staring out the window at the prairies that stretched beyond the neighborhood. The fields rolled on endlessly, reminding me of my childhood on my parents' farm, a place where the horizon was always within reach, but never yours to hold. By 6:30, I would be dressed in one of my worn button-up shirts, a tie that had seen better days, and the same pair of slacks I had rotated through for years. Some might have thought I was careless or unwilling to keep up appearances, but I saw it differently. I valued quiet comfort over vanity. When I slid into my old Chevy truck, its engine sputtering to life like a grumpy companion, I always felt a sense of loyalty to it. That truck had carried me through storms, through long commutes, and even through late-night drives, when the weight of life pressed down too hard to sleep. My job was as dull as the beige walls of the finance office, where I spent most of my days. Endless spreadsheets, endless ticking clocks, endless chatter about promotions that never reached me. But I didn't mind, not entirely. I wasn't chasing titles or applause. What mattered most waited for me at home. Lucas. My son was 8 years old, with a mop of auburn curls that always refused to stay tamed, and eyes so green they reminded me of summer grass after the rain. Lucas was my anchor, the one steady flame in a life that sometimes felt dim. He loved to draw, landscapes, mostly. Rolling fields, rivers bending like ribbons, and wide skies dotted with clouds. I would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching him sketch with a focus that made me smile. He had inherited my quietness, but not my restraint. Where I had learned to bury my emotions, Lucas let his heart spill onto paper with every line of his pencil. It was for him that I endured everything else: the disapproving in-laws, the coldness creeping into my marriage, the whispers that I was a man without ambition. My wife, Sophia, was once the warmth in my life. She was beautiful, vibrant, and full of charm. When we first met, she had seen something in me others did not. Or at least I thought she did. But over the years, something changed. Perhaps it was her work managing a luxury resort, constantly surrounded by the city's elite. Perhaps it was her parents' voices in her ear, reminding her that she had married beneath her station. Her father, Reginald Harrington, was the kind of man who filled every room with his presence. Tall, broad, and forever dressed in tailored suits, he carried himself like a king among peasants. He owned swaths of Topeka through his real estate empire, and never let me forget that the house I lived in belonged to his portfolio. At family gatherings, he would lean back in his chair, sip his wine, and say things like, "You should really think about moving up, Elias. Sophia deserves someone who aspires to more." Her mother, Evelyn, was no less harsh, though her weapons were sharper in their subtlety. She ran a boutique that catered to the city's wealthiest women, dressing them for galas and charity balls. She would glance at my outdated clothes and smile sweetly before asking questions that cut like knives. "Elias, don't you ever feel stuck?" Isn't accounting such a small pond for a man your age? Then there was Marcus, Sophia's brother, who never missed a chance to belittle me. Face it, Elias, he would say with a smirk. You're just along for the ride. Dad's the one who really takes care of Sophia. For a long time, I let their words roll off my back. I told myself that humility was strength, that ignoring their scorn was better than fighting it. After all, I had a secret they knew nothing about. Beneath my modest exterior, I had built something they could never take from me. Late nights, after Lucas was asleep and Sophia was lost in her own world, I studied markets. I invested carefully, quietly, and over the years, I grew wealthier than any of them could imagine. I didn't flaunt it because I didn't need to. My fortune wasn't for show, it was for security, for Lucas, for the peace of knowing I could stand tall if I ever had to. But even the best laid foundations can crumble. It began one crisp autumn morning. The maples outside had turned a fiery red, and the air carried that faint chill that makes you reach for an extra layer. Lucas sat at the breakfast table, his head resting on his hand. His usual chatter was gone. Dad, my head hurts, he whispered, his face pale. I smiled softly, ruffling his curls. Probably just tired, buddy. You were up late drawing last night, remember? He nodded, but the sparkle in his eyes was dim. By afternoon, I got the call that changed everything. His school said he had collapsed. My heart stopped. I drove like a madman in that old Chevy, its engine groaning as if it, too, understood the urgency. When I reached the hospital, the world tilted beneath me. The doctor's words came like hammers. Late-stage brain tumor. I sat by his bed, holding his hand, my mind refusing to accept what I was hearing. How could an 8-year-old, full of life and dreams, be facing something so cruel? Sophia arrived hours later, her perfume filling the sterile room. She looked concerned, yes, but distant, like her mind was already elsewhere. She stayed only briefly, muttering something about a meeting she couldn't miss. In the days that followed, I never left Lucas's side. I watched the color drain from his cheeks, watched his drawings slow until the pencil slipped from his fingers. He would look up at me and whisper, "Dad, can we go home? I just want to draw in the porch light again." My heart shattered each time, but I forced a smile, telling him stories of prairies and rivers, promising that one day we would sit there again, the Harringtons visited now and then, their presence more burden than comfort. Reginald's words stung the most. Did you even take him for regular checkups, Elias? Or were you too busy living small? Evelyn would sigh dramatically, saying, "This is why ambition matters. With better care, maybe this wouldn't have happened." I wanted to scream at them, to throw them out, but I stayed silent for Lucas's sake. In the days that followed my encounter with the old man, something subtle, but unmistakable changed inside me. I didn't wake up feeling suddenly whole, or completely healed. It wasn't anything dramatic like that. Instead, it felt like a small light had been placed somewhere deep within me, something quiet yet persistent. It didn't chase away all the darkness, but it made it easier to see where I was going. Each morning, I found myself drawn back to the old wooden bridge. Sometimes I stood there for a few minutes, other days I stayed longer, listening to the river's gentle murmur. I never saw the old man again, though a part of me hoped I would. His words lingered in the air every time the wind rustled through the trees. Life keeps moving. Gradually, I began to notice things I had ignored for months. The cheerful chatter of birds returning to the branches. The soft crunch of leaves under my shoes. The way sunlight spilled across the river, turning it into liquid gold. These small moments didn't fix everything, but they reminded me that the world was still alive, and maybe I could be 2.1 bright afternoon. After finishing some work I had put off for too long, I felt an unexpected tug of curiosity. My feet led me toward the old community center, a place I hadn't visited since my father passed. He used to volunteer there every weekend, teaching children how to build wooden crafts. I remembered the way he used to come home with stories of the kids' projects, proudly showing me small gifts they had made him. I hesitated at the door, unsure if I should go in. The memories weighing on my chest were both comforting and painful. But something inside me urged me forward, and I pushed the door open gently. The familiar scent of wood shavings and paint filled the air. Laughter echoed through the room. A group of children gathered around a long table, their hands busy with colorful craft pieces. At the front, arranging supplies on a shelf, was a woman with a warm smile. She turned when she heard the door creak. "Hello," she greeted. "Can I help you?" I cleared my throat, suddenly aware of how out of place I must have seemed. I was about to walk back out when a small boy ran up to me with wide, hopeful eyes. "Are you here to help us today?" he asked eagerly. I blinked in surprise. "Oh, I am. I'm not sure." The woman chuckled softly and walked over. "We could use an extra pair of hands. The kids love building things, but it gets a little chaotic with just one adult." I looked around at the children, their excited faces glowing with anticipation. Something warm stirred inside me, something I hadn't felt in a while. "I guess I can help," I said quietly. The boy let out a cheerful shout and rushed back to the table. The woman handed me a small apron. "I'm Grace, by the way." "Daniel," I replied, slipping the apron over my head. We spent the next hour helping the children paint wooden frames and assemble tiny birdhouses. Their joy was bright and contagious. One girl proudly showed me a very crooked birdhouse she had painted in mismatched colors. "Do you think it's good?" she asked shyly. I smiled. "I think it's perfect." Her grin widened as she held it up for others to admire. With every brush stroke, every question, every burst of laughter, I felt something inside me reconnect. My heart didn't feel as heavy. My mind didn't feel as clouded. For the first time in months, I felt present. During a short break, Grace handed me a cup of warm tea. "I'm glad you came," she said gently. "I can tell the kids adore you already." I looked down at the tea, feeling strangely shy. "They remind me of someone, your father?" she asked softly. I met her eyes, startled. "How do you know?" she smiled knowingly. "Everyone here remembers him. He brought so much life to this place. The kids still talk about the little wooden animals he taught them to make." My chest tightened, but it wasn't the suffocating heaviness I used to feel. It was something tender, something that made me breathe a little deeper. "He would be happy you're here," Grace added. I looked around the room again, at the children painting and laughing, and I knew she was right. My father had always believed in giving time and kindness, even when he had little to give. After the session ended, I walked home feeling lighter than I had in a long time. The setting sun cast warm colors across the sky, turning the clouds into soft shades of pink and orange. I hadn't noticed sunsets in months. That day, I couldn't take my eyes off it. The next morning, I returned to the community center, and the next after that. It became a part of my routine, something I looked forward to. The children welcomed me with cheers, and Grace welcomed me with grateful smiles. Slowly, I realized that helping them was helping me just as much. One day, after a particularly fun session of building small model boats, I walked back to the bridge. The sky was painted with streaks of orange and purple, and the river reflected every shade beautifully. I rested my arms on the railing, letting the cool breeze brush against my face. I wondered if the old man would appear. Maybe he'd stand beside me again, offering another piece of wisdom at exactly the right moment. But the bridge remained empty except for me and the soft murmur of the water. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye between the wooden boards. Bending down, I picked up a small, carved wooden leaf. My breath hitched when I saw the words etched on the back. "Keep walking forward." My fingers tightened gently around the leaf. I didn't know who placed it there, but I knew who the message was meant for. I looked up at the sky, which was slowly darkening, and whispered a quiet thank you. Walking home, I felt lighter, steadier. Healing hadn't come all at once. It had come through small moments, little steps, and unexpected kindness. It had come from children who believed in me, from a friend I didn't know I needed, and from the memory of a father whose guidance still reached me, even from beyond. I understood now that the river had always been right. Life never stops moving. Even when we feel stuck, even when the world feels heavy, even when we believe we cannot take another step forward, life gently nudges us on, and this time, I was ready to follow.